Hello, I'm Chuck Phillip with South Alabama Home Inspections, and I figured I'd do a video on the power boxes, or what I call main and sub panels here on the side of the house. And we'll start right here at the meter. This is the device that sends you a bill once a month, and it runs all the way out to the road, to that transformer up there on the pole. And what that transformer does is steps the power down from the main lines above it from around 7,500 volts to 240. So you got two wires coming in wrapped around the neutral wire coming back, and each one of those wires are 120 volts each, and you add them together and it's 240 volts coming to the meter here, and then from the meter to your boxes. And it should step to a main box, which is this one probably is here. So we're going to open it up, and they all open up differently. Some of them are different brands and they have different ways of opening, but before you do that you always want to touch it with the back side of your hand to make sure the panel's not energized, which is not. That way, if it is, it'll throw your hand back instead of grabbing you to it. So we're going to push this little tab down, just push it down and then pull out like that and slide it back. And so this here is going to be the main breaker that should, haven't opened up these others yet, that should control these other sub panels after that. This next one here we'll open up, and notice it's a little bit different than the one before. This is going to open up a different way. It's got this lever here at the bottom, so you just take it with your finger and pull, and it'll drop down like that and just swing open. And there again, we've got probably some additional sub panels somewhere inside the house. And so they're 100 amps. That's what this numbering is for. That tells you the amperage of the breaker there. It's, in this case, we got two 100 amp breakers. But you may also have another breaker here that says AC, which there may be around 50 amps. And that's going to control just the air conditioning unit. So we'll step inside to see what the sub panel looks like on the inside. Well, before we do though, this house is also equipped with a generator, and this is the automatic transfer switch to that. So if the power drops at the road, the generator will turn on down there, and this switch will automatically disconnect from the road and allow power to come in from the generator, and that protects the linemen out there working on the line so it doesn't backfeed power to them. A lot of people here in Alabama have generators on their houses. Good, it's a good choice too. Good idea. Okay, just like I expected, on the other side of the meter, this was the original main panel before the others was added. The other ones probably got added in the 80s or 90s or so. And so this panel opens up different, like the other ones out there. It's a little bit different. So same thing, touch it with the back of your hand, make sure it's not energized, and take your finger, put through the loop, and just pull. It's got a little spring clip right there that holds it. And so now, just like I suspected, at one time this was the main panel, and as a result it has one main breaker on there. So if those other boxes wasn't installed, if I was to just throw this one breaker, it would kill the power to the entire house. And sometimes these main breakers are tripped. They trip all the way down, and it can be for several reasons. It could have a fault, but it could be just simply from getting old. And so all breakers don't last forever. So if they're getting around 30 years old, maybe even 20, you might ought to start considering replacing your breakers. So here we go. We got all these different breakers here, and they should be labeled as to what they control. That's the biggest thing of all. You should know what each one of your breakers control inside the house. But anyway, the purpose of this here is to try to find the breaker that's tripped. We're just in a pretend scenario here. You got a room with several lights out in it, or with no working outlets, and you're trying to find out why that is. Well, this is where you would come to see if it is a trip breaker. If you notice here on the right side of this panel that all these breakers are facing to the left, except for this one. That one's facing to the right. And so this is going to be your trip breaker. and that's why you don't have power to that room. This is also marked blank. So I'm using this as an example as what a trip breaker would look like. There should never be a void where you can see the wiring from inside the panel. They make covers to cover those up, but this person put a breaker in its place to cover the hole, which is acceptable. So you come in here and you find you have a trip breaker, so you want to reset it. So the way you would do that, you take your finger and push it to the left like that, and that should reset your breaker. Now, some breakers won't trip quite like this one here. Some of them will actually kind of stay in the center. And if that's the case, you'll have to do it twice. You have to move it to the left, and then back, and then left again to reset it. Now, if it trips after doing that, again, you want to let that stay tripped, because that means you have a fault somewhere in your system, and it's tripping to protect the wiring and prevent a fire. Some breakers, especially if you have a newer house, you may have a combination of AFCI breakers and GFCI breakers. And the AFCI stands for arc fault, and the GFCI is for ground fault, and some of them are combination arc fault and ground fault. And they should have a little button on there, and you're supposed to come out and test these once a month by taking and pushing that button, and what that does is simulates conditions for that breaker to trip. And so you may have that style of breaker on your house, and they're supposed to be tested periodically to make sure that they're working. But the biggest thing about your breaker box here is that if you have to replace a faulty breaker, now sometimes the trip breaker could be because the breaker's faulty. You don't really have any issue at all with the wiring. It's just the breaker's bad and you have to replace it. So if you do replace your breaker, it should be the same brand as the box. So you'll need to make a note of what the brand of the box is. This is an old panel, it's an ITE. So it should have ITE breakers in here, or breakers that are compatible to ITE, which you would have to find that out. But the main goal here is, the main thing you need to pay attention to is that if you have a square D or a GE panel, then it should be GE and square D breakers in it as well. And you also, let's say this was a 15 amp breaker, it's showing 20 here, but if this was a 15 amp breaker that was bad, you want to replace it with the same size breaker that was there. You don't want to up the breaker to 20 amps, because now you may overload the circuit here. It may not be designed to handle 20 amps. That's one of the things I find quite often doing home inspections, is that the breaker is too big for the size wiring that's connected to it. And also, really, you should hire a qualified electrician to replace your breakers. That should be something that electricians do. But anyway, I hope this has been somewhat informative to you. This is hopefully, if you ever have a trip breaker, you'll know where to go and reset your breakers. You never want to let anything block the covers of this. That includes outside. I do inspections sometimes, and I have a hard time finding the main panel out there because bushes have covered it up. And that's a really bad thing, because if you ever had to go out there and shut off the power in an emergency, you'd be hard pressed to do it because it's just covered. You can't get to it. I've seen the sub panels inside houses where they got shelves in front of this to where you can't get to it for that reason. So you don't never want to have anything blocking these. They should be very easily accessible in case of emergency. So never allow anything to block them too. Another thing I want to mention too about your outside panels, you want to seal up any, we'll go back out there real quick. You want to make sure that there's no holes in the bottom of this here, like these are knockouts. If there's holes in the bottom of these, what'll happen is that wasp will get in here and make nests, and I find that quite frequently. So I have to be double careful when I open up these panels, because I usually do find wasp nests in these. So if you have any openings at the bottom of these panels, you need to make sure that they're properly sealed so that wasps can't build a nest in there. And they all should be caulked too. This one's not. This seam here should be caulked all the way down and all the way across the top and all the way across the sides on all these panels, but not caulked underneath here. And the reason for that is because if water does get back there, it has a way to get out. So if your panels are not caulked, that might be something you might be able to take up on your own. But I highly recommend that your electrical panels be caulked on the tops and sides only. So thanks for watching. I'm Chuck Phillip with South Alabama Home Inspections, and please subscribe to the channel Southern Home Talk, where we constantly are putting up videos that affect our houses here in South Alabama. Thanks for watching.